5th grade Go Math, Chapter 4, Lesson 1. How can patterns help you place the decimal point in a product? Remember, the product is the answer to a multiplication problem. Unlock the problem. Cindy is combining equal size rectangles from different fabric patterns to make a postage stamp quilt. Each rectangle has an area of 75 hundredths of a square inch. If she uses 1,000 rectangles to make the quilt, what will be the area of the quilt? Squiggle underline what you're being asked to find. Circle the important information, mainly numbers, and then underline any keywords to help you know which operation you would be performing. You should have underlined what will be the area of the quilt. Circled 75 hundredths of a square inch. The square inch has to be our label. And then 1,000 rectangles. And then I underlined equal sized because that helps us know with area that we're going to be multiplying. So now what we're going to do to solve this problem is to use a pattern to find the product. So we're taking our inch, so 75 hundredths of a square inch, and one rectangle, that is the area. Then if we have 10, you have 10 times 75 hundredths. Look, you move the decimal one place, so it's 7 and 5/10. There's 1 0 in 10, and then we move the decimal place one place to the right. If you had 100 rectangles times 75 hundredths, you would move it 2 times to the right. And look, there's 2 zeros in 100. And then with 1,000, you have 1,000 times 75 hundredths, and you would move it, well, there's 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3, so they had to move the decimal 3 places. The only problem was with 75 hundredths right here, if you move it, there's 1, 2, we need to move it a third time, so we have to add the 0 to it, and then that's the answer. So the quilt will have an area of blank square inches, and our answer is 750 because this is how many rectangles they asked for. So our lesson today is all about the patterns of 10. Okay? So, as you multiply by increasing powers of 10, how does the position of the decimal point change in the product? So, go ahead and answer the question of the decimal point does what? The decimal point moves which direction? It moves right. Now we're going to look at example 1. So, place value patterns can be used to find the product of a number and the decimals 1/10 and 1/100th. So, our story problem. Jorge is making a scale model of the Willis Tower in Chicago for a theater set. The height of the tower is 1,353 feet. If the model is 1/100th of the actual size of the building, how tall is the model? Squiggle underline what you're being asked to find, circle the important numbers, and underline any keywords. You should have squiggle underlined how tall is the model, and then circled 1/100th and 1,353 feet. Now, in our blue box over here, what fraction of the actual building size is the model? It is 1/100th. And then how do you write that as a decimal? You just have a 1 in the hundredths place. Now, it's important to remember that 1/100th is the same as 1/100th in a fraction, because that's going to help you remembering which way your decimal is going to move. So looking at their pattern, we have 1 times 1,353. Well, that's 1,353. But then when we have 1/10 times 1,353, the decimals moved once, because in a whole number, the decimal would have been right here. And so the decimal has moved one place, which there's one decimal place right here. So it's moved one to the left, 135 and 3/10. So then in 1/100th, there's 2 decimal places. And if the decimal point in a whole number is at the end, we need to move it 2 times. So what we would have, the digits would stay the same, but our decimal would go right here. So Jorge's model of the Willis Tower is 13 53/100 feet tall. Now on this question, number 2, sorry, some of my symbols aren't moving. As you multiply by decreasing powers of 10, how does the position of the decimal point change in the product? So remember, 1/100th is smaller than a whole number, and so that's why it's decreasing, that they're getting smaller and smaller. So we would write the decimal point moves blank. In which direction does it move? It moves left. So briefly to recap, what we just did in our top 2 patterns was if we were multiplying times 10 or 100 or 1,000, which 10 to the first, 10 to the 2, and 10 to the 3 are the same things, we moved the decimal to the right. Then when we multiplied times a decimal of 1/10 or 1/100th, we moved our decimal left. Example 2. 3 friends are selling items at an arts and crafts fair. Josie makes $45.75 selling jewelry. Mark makes 100 times as much as Josie makes by selling his custom furniture. Chance makes 1/10 of the money Mark makes by selling paintings. How much money does each friend make? Now we're being asked to find how much each friend makes, and we have our starting amount that we know, $45.75. We have, I'm going to circle Mark is 100 times as much as Josie. And then we have Chance making 1/10 of Mark. Okay, and then, so that's 1/10, or 1/10. Okay, so we're starting with Josie, and we know that she has $45.75. Mark makes 100 times that, so we're writing 100 in here, and we're going to go through our pattern. So we know that $45.75 times 1 is just $45.75. Times 10, I'm going to have to keep my digits the same, but I need to move my decimal. Now it's times 10, so I'm moving it to the right, and there's 1 0, so I'm moving the decimal 1 time. Times 100, there's 2 zeros, so I'm moving my decimal twice. My digits stay the same, so 4575, and the decimal goes to the end. So how much did Mark make? Times 100, he made $4,575, because the decimal would be at the end. Now that we have Mark, we need Chance. Chance made 1/10 of the money of Mark. So we're going to go 1/10, okay, and Mark was 4,575, and we need that 1/10. So we know that anything times 1 is itself, so the decimal doesn't move. And then we have 1/10, and this time, because we're multiplying by a decimal, we move our decimal, and there's 1 in the decimal place, so we move the decimal once. So our final answer, the digits stay the same, but my decimal is moved over. Okay, and don't forget your $sign in your final answer. So 457, and it's money, so we have to have 2 decimal places, 50 cents. So that's something to think about when you're writing your answers. If you do have a decimal and you're talking about money, you need to make sure that you have the 2 written. So now we're on complete this. So this is like I showed you earlier. Anything to the exponent of 0 is 1. And so remember, this is times 1. That 10 to the 1 is the same as 10. 10 to the second is the same as 10 times 10, or 100. 10 to the third is 1,000. So see if you can fill in part A. Okay. So let's see, anything times 1 is itself, so it doesn't change at all. 4 and 78/100. 10 to the first power, there's 1 0 and the 1. And because it's tens, I move the decimal to the right 1 time. And then 10 to the second, I move it twice because there's 2 zeros in 100, so 478. And I really don't have to write the decimal, but since it's at the end, but I'll show it. Now this one, I'm going to write down my digits of 478, but if I moved my decimal 3 times like I'm supposed to, I need to add a 0 in there. So there's my 0 for my decimal, and a comma because it's in the thousands, 4,780. So again, remember, multiplying by 10 or powers of 10, we move our decimal to the right. Now, looking at B, we're multiplying by decimals, and this is the same as 1/10 and 1/100th. And fractions are another way of writing division, and division is the opposite, and so we go left. Okay? Or you can just think, because it's multiplying by a decimal, instead of 10, I go the other way. So 38 times 1 is 38. 38 times 1/10, there's 1 decimal place. So my decimal starts here, and I move it over to the left once. So 3 8/10. And then with their hundredths, I have my 38, and I move it twice, so my decimal goes right there. We're now moving on to the Sharon Show. Remember while working that when you're multiplying times 10, your digits are staying the same, you're only moving the decimal. Also, if you need to add a 0, you may. So on number 4, you had to move your decimal left.